Hi everybody, I'm Lizzie Bear, and today I thought I'd talk about something not so fun, but something definitely to keep in mind. I'm going to be talking about my personal top 8 trigger movies, so trigger warning and spoiler alert. So first I'm going to talk about, there are some movies that definitely affect people differently and different emotions that it invokes. So my trigger movies might be completely different from someone else's and for different reasons. And I'll try and get into each of those little aspects. I'm going to start from my least trigger movie all the way up to the ones I cannot personally watch ever again. My first one would probably be American Horror Story Asylum. I first have to say I'm a huge fan of the American Horror Story series. Asylum, the reason it bothers me personally is just the idea of being in an institution and you can't get out. The powers that are, the doctors, the nurses, everybody, they're at their own will choosing to make your life miserable. Their interest is not in patient care or helping other people with their own vices. But there's a lot of drama, which is the really cool aspect of it. But my personal fear is just being locked in a place where no one listens to you and you undergo horrible treatment. Again, this movie is not based on current day activity of treatment, like people being locked up in insane asylums, and I know they still do some electroshock therapy, but it's not to the violent extent that American Horror Story does. And then just seeing all the different relationships between the patients and how controlling it can be, and it's almost like a prison type attitude that I have a personal hard time of dealing with. It's not like today's techniques of trying to help people where, you talk about the problem, it's not let's beat it till you're normal kind of thing. But it's a great series. It's really interesting. You definitely get hooked and they leave you hanging, that's for sure. My second movie that it's kind of getting a little heavier would be American Horror Story Murder House. Murder House is really interesting, just like the previous American Horror Story I talked about. In it, there's, all these things, cheating, envy, and my issue is suicide. Zoe ends up slitting her wrist and killing herself. Again, that's a real big issue with me because I had cut in the past and I know how addicting it can be. It's not like your traditional addiction, but it's like when something goes wrong, you needed to find a way to let that energy and all those negative feelings out. It's highly addictive. Warning, please don't ever get into cutting. It is so hard to stop. It really is. You don't realize how hard it is until you try. Because you don't have other coping skills in place. So it just feels so much harder trying to break out of that cycle. And it's very dangerous, obviously. You can cut a nerve and just bleed out. And a lot of times when I had cut before, I didn't want to hurt my family. I was hurting inside, so I was punishing myself physically, but the release after I cut was what I imagine being high would feel like. It's like euphoric and just all your problems melt away. But I would never want, my parents or my husband or anyone to find me, bled out in the bathroom. It's any type of suicide and someone who finds your body I can only imagine how hard it is for those people, your loved ones. You may think you're alone, but you're not. Someone will find you, and then that image will never leave them, ever. So if you're thinking about suicide, please get help. Cutting is so much more popular. I remember in high school knowing a bunch of girls and some guys that would cut to kind of deal with their depression and anxiety. And I think it's very overlooked in schools. I've talked to an old teacher of mine, and I asked, what kind of procedures are in place, for situations like if a teacher suspects a student cutting or self-harming in any way, shape, or form, burning, anything like that. And I was told that they have a class, maybe every other year, on dealing with it, but it really just gets pushed to counseling, and then it gets pushed to your parents, and it's not a good situation to be in as, the student who is self-harming, because, you feel that, you eventually tell someone, and then they kind of backstab you, in my opinion. They kind of backstab you with that trust, and they tell people you weren't prepared to talk about. And it's hard to talk about something like that with your parents and people you love, because they love you. They do. But you just are having trouble with dealing with emotions and coping and other things that, people don't understand until they're in your situation. So that's my little rant on self-harm and awareness. My next scary movie is Sucker Punch. It's a really fun movie. It's about this young girl. She ends up going into an insane asylum because of her abusive family member, which that's hard to think about in itself. Child abuse, just awful. But we go through the story and we meet all these different inmates, which they're all girls. And you see her, the main character, Baby Doll. She is able to flip her mind from seeing the present to it in a more understandable way for her. She ends up seeing she's fighting people. She's trying to gain control and to get out and be free. But she does end up getting caught, and the staff at the asylum, they forcefully give her a lobotomy so she won't cause trouble anymore. In case you're wondering, a lobotomy was used they would stick a large needle at the corner of your eye, and they'd get a small hammer and just smack it right in your eye so it would go into your brain. A lot of people didn't survive it. And the people that did, they looked like walking zombies. They had no emotion. They were gone as a person. And that idea for me, is kind of scary, that someone could misuse a treatment to get me to comply to social standards or whatever, and have lost who I am as a person. And it's not a positive treatment. It's just it's a control aspect, and that bothers me, because no one should have the power to turn you into a zombie. I mean, unless you like zombie movies, that's pretty cool, but nobody really wants to be a zombie. Not as a mental illness. You don't want to be totally doped up on tons of medication and just, you're not living at that point. And I was there at that point. I was a zombie of a person, and you don't feel normal, and nothing seems normal. So you have to find a way to move on. But luckily, there is a happy ending in the movie, but unfortunately not for the main character. My next movie is one that it's not so physically, like you can see the suffering, but it's more how I feel emotionally. It's called Girl Interrupted.
Why does the sun go on?
It has Angelina Jolie in it and Winona Ryder. It's a really good movie. It's about Winona Ryder. She has a borderline personality disorder, and she goes to inpatient treatment, and she can't check herself out until the medical team approves her. Again, but this is not the vindictive, evil medical team like it was in American Horror Story Asylum. But this kind of shows what it was like at that time to be involved if you have a mental illness. One of the girls there, she has an eating disorder. Another girl thought she was a child, still a child, like 5 or 6 years old. Another one was just a social psychopath. And another girl was in there because she was gay, which back then it was considered a mental health issue that if you didn't want to be with the opposite sex, there was something seriously wrong with you, so they'd lock you up. It shows of, the prescription overload and how the patients, they find a way to get what they want, like trading medications or, trying to mess with the medical team. And it got hard to watch at times just because I've been in that dissociative state where you kind of lose contact of where you are and you lose track of time and things just seem all jumbled in your head, and then you end up in a place you had no idea you were there. So that's kind of a surreal vision for me, because I've been there, and that feeling of getting lost in time is really scary because you have no idea what you did or what happened or what's going on until you kind of wake up again. So that's uncomfortable for me to watch. There's also suicide and some drug use in that movie as well, which that's obviously another issue for me, just because it's so hard to watch someone who has committed suicide and what they have left behind. So again, that's not a way out. It's not, there's always a way out, but not that route. That's not the way to go. You aren't supposed to go that way. People choose to, and they don't think about all the other people in their life that love them and care about them. So just don't ever forget that there are people that love you. I care about every one of you going through mental health issues, PTSD, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, anything. It's hard, but as a community, we can do it together. There's so many of us out there that you're never alone. There's always somebody walking the same path. My next movie is something in the horror genre. It's Saw 3. I have trouble watching the Saw movies anyway, just because they're really gory, they're really violent. I remember the first movie, in the beginning of the scenes, this guy has to run through this maze of barbed wire, and obviously he gets caught up on it, and the idea of thousands of razor blades cutting you as an ex-cutter, that bothers me a lot, just because it's so hard to, I can almost feel the cuts when he runs through it. Like, I can feel it on my body, and it gives me the willies. So it's not something I like to think about or watch. But particularly Saw 3, when there are a whole bunch of people locked up in a house and they have to kind of fight their demons. The one girl, she has to, spoiler alert, she has to stick her hand in these boxes to get a key, but it ends up, the glass, starts slicing her wrists. Again, big problem for me. And then, this part really gets me. There's a woman who is thrown into a pit with a bunch of needles. Ooh. Oh, that just creeps me out. I don't like going to the hospital anyway, but the idea of thousands and thousands of needles just poking you all over your body, going in your skin, just, I can't, sorry, I'm freaking out just thinking about it. I can't stand that. That is probably the roughest thing to even think about, is getting your arms sliced up and then needles poking you all over your body. So every move you make, you get another stab and another stab, and you breathe and there's another stab. And then she comes up and she's covered in these needles just sticking out of her arm that she has to pull out. And it's just, that just, I can't deal with that. Next movie, another horror movie. It's Hostel. I can't watch any of them. Absolutely not. The idea of being completely helpless in a situation you can't get out of, which is, again, my personal feelings at first of PTSD, my anxiety, my depression, is there is no way out. You are completely trapped. You will suffer and suffer and suffer, and it will never end until someone ends it for you, which that's not the case. There is ways of moving on, and we're going to move on together. I'm here with you. We won't do this alone, I promise. There are a couple scenes in particular that just really get to me. It was in I think it was the second Hostel movie, where this young girl was hung up in a chandelier, and her body is just hanging down. She's completely naked, and this woman comes in, and she lays in this tub and uses this big old scythe to cut this girl up, and she just bathes in her blood. That's really uncomfortable. Just watching that woman enjoy being completely covered, head to toe, all in her hair, all over her face, in someone's warm blood, and listening to the girl scream above her, and she has like an orgasmic experience with this. It's so disturbing. I can't watch the Hostel movies ever again. It makes me so anxious. When I watched it with my husband the one time, who's a big horror fan, I had a huge panic attack. I had nightmares for weeks. And this is even before I was attacked. Okay, and my number 2 trigger movie would be the movie Sybil. It's an older movie. I think it was done in like the 1970s, but it's a story of a woman who has multiple personalities, and it kind of follows, her daily life and how she'll end up changing personalities without even realizing she's changed, and the people around her trying to understand, like, what's going on with her. She starts seeing a therapist, and the therapist, is introduced to all of these different people, and they're very different. You go from a girl who's probably 5 years old and just wants to play and have fun, and then you end up with a girl who's very eloquent, and she speaks French, and she plays piano, she knows drawing, art, and all that. But then it tells you the backstory, and that's where I have trouble. There's a lot of child abuse in this. I was never personally abused as a child. I had a great growing up, but I don't think child abuse settles well with anyone. You just see, like, her mother would hang her by her wrists in a barn all day and just let her hang there for no reason. Or she's locked in a cupboard and she has to stay in there all day. You know, that life of that poor girl is just so sad. And then once you think, you know, hanging this little girl by her wrists all day sucks, or being locked in a box, essentially, that sucks, it gets worse. Her mother forces her to squeeze an enema bottle into herself while her mother plays the piano, and she has to maintain pressure on it and not let go. And this little girl, I'm not kidding, is probably 5 years old. Like, that tears at my heart, seeing that poor little girl suffer. And she ends up, like, passing out because she can't contain it. And her mother's just so evil and so vindictive. She trips her daughter down the stairs and calls it one of her falls. Bull. Oh, it's absolutely so hard to watch. And then things could not get any worse. Her mother gets one of those old shoe hooks, like, that they used to use to, like, buckle little girls' shoes. She uses that inside of her daughter down there. And she had to go to the doctors at some point, and the doctor looked at her down there, and he was completely shocked. He didn't do anything, but he stated that she was so mangled and so ruined down there. She would never be able to have children, ever. Like, how could a mother just destroy her daughter, not just physically, emotionally, and sexually? Like, sexual assault is not cool at all. It is not acceptable. It is not appropriate. Nobody ever asked for sexual assault. That just, I lost it at that point. Because she's 5 years old and she has to go through all this trauma. I mean, how can a 5-year-old handle all that? I mean, people as adults can't even handle that. So how do we expect this young girl to be able to survive and be a normal person? The reason she has the multiple personalities is it was her brain's way of taking her to a safe place. Where, you know, oh, if something bad was happening, she'd turn into the eloquent French lady. That, you know, everything was perfect, darling, it's fabulous. It's fine. Okay? If that works. And then she'll kind of transfer back to somebody else. Or she'll turn into a child and start jumping on the couch. Or she'll cry under the piano. Like, it's so sad. That how could that woman function, you know, from when it happened to an adult, and she didn't hurt herself. That she still tried to maintain a normal life. I mean, her father didn't know about all the abuse until she tried to talk about it, and he didn't protect her. The doctor didn't protect her. Family didn't protect her. Like, she was a soldier by herself. And, you know, the fact that she was able to have a job, at least for a while, you know, I give her all the credit in the world. That's just beyond what I can imagine a normal person doing. Like, I was attacked and I can't go back to work because I can't be in public and be around people. It's sad. It's very hard to watch. It's like, it pulls at every string in your heart that, I don't know, after I watched that movie, I broke down. I was inconsolable. I tried all my normal, you know, relaxing techniques, meditation, all that. And I just couldn't get it. It was really, the director did an amazing job at capturing it. And, you know, all the actors involved, they did an amazing job, but it is a real tough pill to swallow. That brings us to my number 1 pick, which is the movie 13. It's about this young girl. She's in, you know, like going in middle school. She was the normal, average American girl. You know, she was in school. She did well. She got good grades. She helped her mom. Her mom and her were really good friends. Dad is not really in the picture, so they were like BFFs, which is pretty cool. If you can have, you know, your mom as your best friend, that's fun. I mean, she's your provider, she's your caregiver, and that she's your friend, and she would listen to you. You would do fun things together. I think that's awesome. But then she wants to be popular, and she meets this girl, and this girl is kind of a hoe. She gets this girl into doing drugs and alcohol and, you know, doing sexual activities with young boys, you know, her age or even a little bit older. And that's hard to watch. They start huffing like the cans you clean off your computer with, and she like has her friend punch her in the face, and she gets a bloody lip because she's so high she doesn't feel the pain, which that's weird. And, you know, other drug use, I think there's like coke and weed, obviously. But my hard part is she's a cutter too. Again, that's my issue, my personal issue. She's so young, and that's what is so hurtful, because all these girls are trying to be cool and popular and, you know, having sex at a young age and doing drugs and alcohol. It's so sad. It's so sad to think that, you know, kids think that's what they have to do to be cool. And she ends up cutting herself, and every time, you know, things get rough with her mom, she cuts herself, and her arms are getting, you know, she covers them with like the sweatbands and long sweaters and, you know, all the traditional signs of a cutter. And there's one point in the movie where her mom forces her to slide up her sleeve, and she's crying, she's begging her mom not to look, and her mom sees that. And it's the look on her mom's face that it really bothers me. I think about my own mom and what my mom saw with me, and that just, it breaks my heart. As I've gotten older, I realized how much it hurt my mom, and at that time, something I thought that was end of the world, that I should die, that I shouldn't live anymore, was so trivial as an adult, and I see that. But it's become so popular and so used that it's heartbreaking to think that, you know, kids are getting younger and younger, and they're starting to, you know, cut themselves or burn themselves or, you know, get involved in drugs and alcohol. And that's just, I wish there was a way I could fight back for all those kids going through that. And I think that we need to pay more attention as a society, because now there's more kids bringing guns to school, and the schools can only do so much. And, you know, the pressure of just growing up and hormones, I mean, that sucks already. But having to go through self-harm alone, it's just, that's something I can't handle. And I could never watch those movies. It just totally breaks my heart. And it puts me in a place that I can't recover and be healthy if I watch those things. And you see all these people on like Tumblr and Instagram and Pinterest, and they're posting pictures of them cutting themselves, and you can just see the blood dripping, and some people's arms who are completely scarred, like from head to toe or on the thighs, just all those old scars, new cuts. Like, it's just, it's hard to even imagine. Why? It's not for attention. Some people think it's an attention thing. Attention-seeking behavior. It's not. It is absolutely not. It is someone who is going through something so hard that they need a way to express that. And they do it by hurting themselves so they don't hurt other people. Which, in a way, I hate to say is kind of noble, but suffering like that is not. It's absolutely not noble to suffer. There are people that can help you and people to talk to, and there's always somebody out there, someone who's gone through it, someone who's sympathetic, who's lost a loved one, someone who knows someone that's going through it. There's someone out there for everybody, I promise you. But those were my top movies that totally put me in a really bad, dark place. Not so much the American Horror Stories, because I'm a fan, I'm not going to lie. But the closer down my list, the more I can't do. And after thinking about the movies I couldn't handle, I sat down and tried to think, what other movies would be hard for people with mental illness or, the military to watch. Fight Club. It's a good movie. Not arguing that. But, you see all the things that, with mental health that become an issue, like drugs and alcohol, sex addictions. It just gets messed up. There was a funny movie, actually, by Jim Carrey. It was Me, Myself, and Irene. I saw that. That was pretty funny. That was a dissociative disorder, which, you see him flip-flop between his differences, and they did it in a funny way. It makes light of that mental illness in particular. Black Swan, that one was kind of rough. Black Swan dealt with like OCD and schizophrenia and the need to be super, super thin, to be the best and the skinniest and everything along those lines. Dissociative, borderline, just like Girl Interrupted. More movies are highlighting mental illness. Some, like Me, Myself, and Irene, they make it funny and enjoyable. But movies like Sybil, they bring you back to the dark place of what mental health truly is. I thought about it for a while, and I've watched war movies like Saving Private Ryan, but I think movies like The American Sniper, to more recent veterans, that would be hard to watch because it's so real, and it would be so easy, I think, to transport yourself back to Afghanistan and all those other places, that it's so real. All the equipment's the same, the uniform's the same, the environment's the same, the enemy is the same. And I would think that'd be really hard to sit through and watch. You watch your friends getting killed, the intensity, hearing the bombs explode, the IEDs, the gunfire. I would imagine that would be really tough. For older veterans, I saw a really good little mini-series on TV called Band of Brothers. That was really cool. That was World War II. It was really good. It follows, the guys all the way from, basic training all the way to the end of the war and after the end of the war. It's interesting to see, at that time, trench foot and being in freezing temperatures, no supplies whatsoever, no winter clothing, watching your buddies getting blown to pieces, losing so many people and seeing, those young faces in the crowd that you end up killing, that you personally are taking that life. Some of the issues that I would think our military would be going through, again, I don't know. I wasn't a veteran. I never served in a war. The closest thing I got to was Army ROTC in college. But, seeing your friends getting shot, and being triggered back to that place that it's unfamiliar to anyone unless you live there, unless you live that life. Hearing fireworks, not knowing who to trust, having like the gunfighter seat. My dad told me about that one a long time when I was a kid. But I realize, now that I could totally understand why. The gunfighter seat is like if you're in a very public place, a restaurant, a library, even in a group setting, you always have to have your back against the wall. If you can't see everything going on, hear everything going on, watching the behavior of all the people around you, that would be really hard. I mean, I have problems being around all kinds of people, and I do the gunfighter seat thing personally because it makes me feel a little bit more in control, and it helps with the hypervigilance of the fight or flight thing, which that's something that I go through, and it's been said that our veterans go through that too, and how debilitating it is, and how you get into a place mentally that you can't see what's currently happening. But I did this video to kind of make people aware, helping your friends, thinking about, different kinds of movies or things you post on Pinterest or Facebook or all these other different media outlets, and just kind of being conscious and thinking about it. Thinking about how your picture of, pretending to be cool, of cutting your wrist or doing drugs or whatever, that could be triggering somebody. Now, I'm not saying, never light off a firework or, just not help someone who's in a crisis. But be mindful. Be mindful of what you're doing and how your behavior could be affecting somebody else. I didn't mean for this to be a total downer, but for me, it was like a way of warning. And hopefully it makes people realize what's going on and how the little things matter to someone who's suffering from a mental illness, PTSD, anxiety, depression, any of that, and how much the little things can turn into big things in your mind. Again, I am so excited that you guys are here. I'll be posting more videos soon. I love you. Don't ever forget, I'm always here for you. And we're going to do it together as a team. Mwah! Bye.
This record is for anybody thinking about giving up on life.
Maybe we can try.
For anybody going through a dark time, suffering, feeling all alone, this is for you.
Suicide occurs across all ethnic, economic, social, and age boundaries. In 2002, suicide was the 11th leading cause of death in the U.S., claiming over 31,000 lives. Suicide rates among youth, ages 15 to 24, have increased more than 200% in the last 50 years. That's 86 suicides per day, one suicide every 17 minutes.
Another godforsaken day in this old place, trying to climb a mountain with no face, dying to reach above the clouds so you can see how the sun tastes. But it seems you're climbing in place and finding no trace. Your whole world is dark and your will is chafed, and your soul is steady growing weary from this cold race. Each day you wait for your inevitable fate, as the stress and pressure increase with immeasurable weight on your head, neck, and shoulders. You can't even think straight, falling deeper in a depressed, can't even sleep state. You ask yourself every day, how much more can I take? Your whole life is in pieces, how much more can it break? The frustration, anguish, and tears makes it painfully clear that you don't want to stay here on the brink of despair with them voices in your ear. Before you take another step, I got a message you should hear. Listen, put the gun down, drop the razor blade, throw the pills away, stick around another day. I know it's hard to do it, stress and the pressure brewing, we all going through it. I know it's dark now, your soul is in a bind. Give it a little time, believe me, the sun will shine. You see, you ain't a loser, your life isn't worthless. You here for a reason, believe it, you got a purpose. Look, I know it ain't easy, life ain't fair, I've been there, yo, believe me. But one thing I've learned in my life to be true is that we gain experience from the pain we go through, and the experience we learn turns out to be wisdom. So when the youth need guidance, we got something to give them. And what can be more important and precious than having taught a lost soul a life lesson while you leave an impression? See, whether you believe in God or not isn't the issue. The issue lies in the hearts of all those who miss you. Cause if you take yourself out, you take a piece of them with you. Some might even wanna go along with you. That's how love is. And get it clear, this ain't just another track for you to hear. This is something from the heart, cause I care. So I'm reaching out, using what I'm gifted with to speak it out, leaving you with something real to think about. Think about life.
Many suicides are preventable. Most suicidal people desperately want to live. They're just unable to see alternatives to their problems. Most suicidal people give definite warning signals of their suicidal intentions, but those in close contact are often unaware of the significance of these warnings or unsure of what to do about them.
Look, man, there's hope. There's hope and there's help. If you or someone you know is struggling with suicidal ideations, there's help. Call 1-800-SUICIDE or 1-800-784-2433. Talk to somebody. Life is worth living. Live, live.